Welcome to the forest. My name is JC and I work for Texas A&M Forest Service. I've never seen you here before, but you've come on a very special day. Today is Texas Arbor Day, and we're here at the Jones State Forest in Conroe, just outside of Houston, preparing to do some education. You know, if you'd like, I can give you a tour and you can learn with us. See, Texas Arbor Day is a very special holiday for us. It's the one day a year where we get to remember just how special our trees are and all the things that they do for us. There is a National Arbor Day, but in Texas, we changed the date. So Arbor Day in the rest of the country happens in the spring, but in Texas, it happens in November. Our Texas legislature made Texas Arbor Day a holiday in 1889, a long, long time ago. But it's because November is the best time to start planting trees in Texas. As you know, it can get pretty hot here. So our baby trees that are new, and we just planted them in the ground, might not be able to survive our harsh summers. And that's part of what our agency helps Texans learn how to do. Not just plant trees on Arbor Day, but learn how to keep them safe and healthy too. One of the first things we need to know in keeping our trees and forests safe is that trees are alive. They are living beings. And just like every living being, they have some very special needs that they need to get taken care of in order to survive. As a human, we also have needs. We need food and water. We need a space to live, a shelter. We need air. And we need community, a space to exist, and people around us that we can get to know. Trees are the same way. They really like to live in communities. Now, where I would want to take a big bite of a hamburger, trees don't have mouths or teeth, so they're not going to eat hamburgers. Trees actually make their own food, and sometimes we eat their food too. That's what maple syrup is. It is the food made by these trees. These leaves are soaking up sunlight, and that sunlight is getting combined with water and carbon dioxide. What we breathe in is oxygen. What we breathe out is carbon dioxide. So it makes a great relationship. We give trees what they need, and they give us what we need. And if everything works, and trees get exactly enough of all of their needs and everything's met, then over time, those little trees that we planted will turn into bigger trees. Every tree grows to the space that it's supposed to fit. And that's why we need to remember the kinds of trees that we have, because they're all trees, right? But we know that there's different kinds, just based on the different kinds of leaves that they have. These are both oak trees, but even these have different leaves. So it takes a lot of learning. We have biologists and people that work in our lab to grow these trees that help us every day make sure that we know how to take care of them effectively. One of the next things that trees need is space. Oh gosh, my trees look awfully crowded in there. This is a good example of knowing the right kind of tree to put in the right kind of space. You see, if we take a tree that doesn't need a lot of space and give it too much room, it might not grow as well as it should, or it's not designed to live in this ecosystem. On the other hand, sometimes we plant really big trees where they don't have enough space, and it can be a little uncomfortable. They don't have room to grow. But if you swap them around and learn what each tree needs, like individuals, we're all different, then you can make sure that our trees have exactly the right fit. Now, understanding how they grow and what's going to happen to them requires that we understand what's happening on the inside of our trees. I bet that you've seen one of these before. It's called a tree cookie. These tree cookies are made of carbon because the trees are breathing in carbon dioxide, right? They breathe it in and then they store it in their wood. And over the life of this tree, as it gets older, they're going to continue to store that carbon and contribute to cycles in their ecosystem. This is an example of a tree's life cycle. Some people think that if you leave a tree alone, it'll live forever, but that's just not the case. Every tree, everywhere, has a life cycle, just like we do, and everything begins super small. It'll start with a seed. That seed will be planted in the ground, and if it gets enough of the things that it needs to survive, it'll grow. We'll have a sprout, and that sprout will push out of the soil, spread its leaves, and eventually keep growing and growing until it's a sapling. And then that sapling will turn into a mature tree if it gets everything it needs. Now, our mature trees can be really, really big, like these ones, or mature trees can be bushy and short. It just depends on where you find them. And part of understanding how to take care of them is knowing what's going to happen at the next phase of their life cycle. If trees are left alone in the forest, two things can happen. The tree can fall down, and it can become a decomposing log. It returns to the soil, and it helps cycle that nutrients. That's a good thing too. Trees can also not fall directly, but they might lose their limbs, or the leaves will fall off. And the tree is not doing photosynthesis anymore, but it does provide a very special purpose of that ecosystem. These are habitat trees. We call them snags, but I call them bug hotels, because on the inside, you have all sorts of things living in the cavities and growing and creating their own life cycles. On the inside of our tree, while it's still living, and at the very end of its life cycle, before it becomes a snag, trees have lots of sugar. Remember how we said trees make their own food? That's happening right here on the inside. On the very outside of our tree, we have the bark. That's what's going to protect the tree. Just on the inside of that is a layer called the phloem. I say the phloem flows for food. That's what's happening. In the leaves up at the top of the tree, those leaves are capturing sunlight and making sugar. But our roots that are down in the soil are very hungry. So the tree had to come up with a way to get that sugar from there, down there. That's the phloem. On the inside of the phloem, we have another layer called the cambium. And if you've ever picked up a stick and kind of picked at it a little bit, you can see the green stuff underneath the bark. That's the cambium. It can be a little sticky and slimy, and that's because those are stem cells. There's a water layer there that's helping our tree grow, and that's how we get all of these rings. All of the rings on the inside, just inside of that cambium, are called the xylem. Our leaves absolutely need water in order to make that sugar, but the water's in the ground. Either it rained or there's groundwater that the tree's roots are soaking up, and the tree needed a way to get that water all the way up to the top. That's what the xylem does. And on the very inside of our tree, the darkest layer is called the heartwood. This is the oldest part of our tree, and it's really like a backbone. It's very strong, and it keeps the tree from breaking when wind blows. Think of our backbone. What does it help us do? We stand up straight, we can move around, and we can bend and shake, but we don't snap over immediately. It helps us do what we need to do better. Let's take a closer look at what's happening on the inside of these trees, because the more you know about those individual parts and the job that they do, you can understand how they all work together to make sure that the tree is growing and living through its life cycle. On the very inside of our tree, remember, we have that heartwood. Let's put on some heartwood. It's going to give the tree its strength. On the outside of that heartwood, we have our growing layered rings, the xylem. Oops, xylem, water. On the outside of that xylem layer, we have our cambium, that green slimy layer. That's going to become new cells, either for the xylem or for the phloem, where the food is transported. On the very outside of everything is the bark, to protect the tree from insects and disease, to make sure the water stays inside, and that the tree stays healthy, just like we have skin. It keeps the bad stuff out and the good stuff in. The tree also has roots down in the soil and leaves that capture the sunlight. And when you put this into action, everything's working together all at once, and all of these trees are doing it at the same time. That's what we get a forest, an entire ecosystem of trees breathing and getting nutrients and contributing to the world around them. And when you put them all together, you have to consider things like space. Remember how we said if you don't have enough space, you can't grow. You're not going to have enough room to expand and to get the things that you need. So as a forester or any other position in the field that has to pay attention to what's going on with forests, we need to start thinking about forest health, not just planting new trees. When trees are spaced out, they have enough room to get the nutrients. Let's do an example. I have some nutrients here, and we're going to distribute it in the forest. I have some nutrients in the soil, some water, and some sunlight. Now, we can't always control what happens with the water because we're not controlling the weather. And we can't always control the sun, but we can help bring nutrients into the ecosystem, and we can help space things out so that everything has access to the sun. And as our nutrients are spread throughout our ecosystem, everybody's going to get what they need. And our little tree growing in between it all is also going to get a chance to grow big and tall. Now, what happens if our trees are growing too close together? When that space starts to reduce, you have other bushes and other trees and other plants that are too crowded It might look green and healthy. You might drive by and say, that's a great forest. But to somebody that knows what they're looking at, they might say, it's overcrowded. There's not enough room to grow. And those trees are hungry, they're thirsty, they're looking for nutrients, and they can't all get exactly what they need because they're competing. Now, if we spread our trees out again, and this is what we do in forests where the products, or the trees are going to be turned into the products that we use, we plant our trees in rows. By planting them in rows, we can determine exactly how much space is in between, and that helps us know how the tree is going to grow, both in shape and diameter. Now I have another example over here. We have a very large tree cookie that's going to show us the inner details. When you zoom in close, you'll notice that our tree cookie is almost a complete perfect circle. And not only that, we know that you can age a tree by its rings, but did you know you can also know how it grew, how much it grew from year to year? That space in between the dark rings tells you what was happening in the tree's life. If it got enough nutrients, water, sunlight, and air, it grew as well as it possibly could, and all of the trees around it grew well too. Trees like this in managed forests can be turned into products that we use. And the positions or the careers that allow us to pay attention to these kinds of things, one example is a forester. It's a forester's job to work in the forest and to help monitor the health and the growth of these trees, to make sure that they have enough space, that they are as old as we want them to be, and that they're making sure they're tall and straight, so that when we're ready to turn them into forest products, we have the best kind of trees possible. And as long as we're doing that, making sure that the whole forest is healthy, that our individual trees that are going to be products are healthy, then we can start to innovate and design new things like this. Building our world out of wood requires, well, a whole lot of it, but we have more trees today than we ever have before because we know how to grow them better than we did a few years ago. An example of a forest product that allows us to build our world out of wood safely is this one, cross-laminated timber. These kinds of timber products, where the wood is made by giant panels and they interlock, allows us to build structures, buildings, skyscrapers out of wood. And they're still storing carbon. So while we might be storing carbon in a big active forest like this because the trees are still standing, if we turn those trees into new things, we can store carbon even longer and then replant to store even more. It's not just building materials though. You're pretty familiar with wood. We got a lot of different kinds of wood, lots of different styles. But we also have things that we use throughout our daily lives, like this for example. You see, if you grind wood down really fine, you get a product called cellulose. And cellulose gets added to a lot of our food and personal care products like makeup and shampoo. Really, it gives structure and strength to some liquidy components. So it also can be added to like cheeses that we don't want to cake or get liquidy and gross. Paper is another example of something that shredded wood can be turned into. It starts as chips and then gets processed even further, fine down, pressed down to many different paper styles. Whether you're going to be making paper for a book or brown paper or even toilet paper. All of these things are products that we use every day. And it's important to remind ourselves to stay connected because our ecosystem needs us too. If we get too disconnected, we forget that we have a role, and our role is to protect what's going on. A really good example of something we do well to protect our forest is making sure that endangered species, like the red-cockaded woodpecker, have everything they need to stay healthy. This endangered species is pretty special because it's the only species of woodpecker that makes its homes in live pine trees. Other woodpeckers will wait till the pines have died, and they'll be snag trees, so a little bit softer to make cavities in. But our little red-cockaded woodpecker is pretty tough. They'll peck into these trees and make their little cavity holes where they'll have their babies inside, and they'll grow to the right size until they can leave the nest. And on the outside, they've pecked around their hole to release that sap. That phloem layer where that sap was flowing gets tapped. And this helps protect the nest from other predators and things that might want to invade it. And while we're busy making sure the forest is safe and healthy for species like this and providing all sorts of ecosystem services, it also helps us prepare for the future of products because we're not just paying attention to trees, we're paying attention to everything else around them and making sure that everything is in balance so our trees can go to exactly the right size and be turned into the products that we use. I'm going to show you an example of what it looks like to manage a forest. Sustainably managed forests are an active process. We have to pay attention and make some very careful decisions. Whether it's the understory or the midstory or the canopy, we know that there's lots of different kinds of things living here, and every decision we make has an impact. One of those decisions we can make to help improve the health and availability of endangered species like the red-cockaded woodpecker is to build them little homes where they might not be able to build them on their own. And they prefer a habitat just like this. This special little bird requires that we manage our forests so that we have an open understory, plenty of room to fly and seek out all the opportunities that they need for life, as well as to escape predators. Because as we know, ecosystems are functioning. There's lots of different things going on, lots of different species growing and eating and finding their food and making babies, and it's happening all the time. And understanding how things interact, it can be helpful to learn what the energy passage through the ecosystem really looks like. It always starts with the sun. Remember how our leaves need photosynthesis to happen to make that sugar? That energy comes from the sun. So if we trace the energy from our sun to where it's going to go next, a plant, we have a pine tree. This is the habitat of the red-cockaded woodpecker. And this pine tree is going to have its roots down in the soil. It's going to contribute to what's happening down in the ground, where creatures like worms and ants and insects live. And those worms and ants and insects are going to become food for our red-cockaded woodpecker. He'll eat the worm and feed his babies, because red-cockaded woodpeckers are actually stay-at-home dads. The dads stay in the nest and take care of the babies. They'll feed them and make sure everybody has what they need, and keep an eye out for predators, like snakes, who like to make their way up the tree and get into the nest to find their food source. That's why the red-cockaded woodpecker learned how to peck the outside of the tree and release that sap layer so it's sticky and traps the snake. Now, it's important to remember, we don't want to get rid of these characters. Snakes can be scary to people, but they're also an essential part of our ecosystems. So we have to pay attention to what they need and also keep our distance. Understanding a forest is more than just planting, and it's more than just looking at the health of them or the spacing of trees. It also means that somebody's in charge of protecting the forest when things go wrong. And when I think of things going wrong, the main thing I think about is wildfire. It's a big threat in Texas because we got a lot of land, and it doesn't rain as often as we'd like it to. So things tend to get dry. And all of this is fuel. So whether it's a natural wildfire that was started, say, like lightning struck the ground and it lit something on fire, or if it was a human-caused wildfire, which 90% of them are, we have to be paying attention to that. And that's the other thing that we do. Texas A&M Forest Service is not just the tree people, we're also the fire and emergency response people. We show up when things go wrong so we can make sure we're protecting all of Texas and you too. Things like floods can be devastating. Too much water all at once. We show up and help here. Things like wildfires surrounding our communities. We show up and make sure they don't spread too far and don't danger our homes and our buildings. And then other big disasters like hurricanes or tornadoes can be very disastrous. So we show up to lend a hand and make sure that everybody is also safe and making the right kinds of decisions that can prevent disaster as well as be prepared for them. That's never more true than with wildfire. So understanding our fire rules requires that we have to know how a fire works. This is what's called the fire triangle. And all of our field staff, all of our wildland firefighters, and anybody that works for the agency has a really good understanding of this fire triangle because it tells us exactly what a fire needs to burn, as well as how to put it out. If we remove any of these elements, be it the fuel or the heat or oxygen, the fire will extinguish. In wildland firefighting, we won't necessarily have enough water available to us in order to put out a fire by removing the heat. So one of the things that we can do is lay down what's called a hand line. We use hand tools like this here, and she's drawing a line in the dirt to remove the fuel source. So even if we can't extinguish the fire directly, we can make sure that it's not spreading to the nearby sources. This is how we make sure that communities stay safe. And it does require a lot of tools. I bet that you've seen in your communities some of those big fire trucks. Maybe they're red or white, they got big flashing sirens and they're very loud. Those are structural firefighters. And those are the folks that are going into buildings to put out fire. So they have a different kind of uniform. They have to wear bunker gear and oxygen masks. But if we did that in wildland fire, it'd be way too hot. We also have to make sure that our trucks are equipped with everything that we need to be in the wild, because we might be really far from a city. We gotta be prepared. And as long as we are prepared, as long as you're taking the steps that you need to take to protect your home or protect your school, then we can all stay safe. And our trees can continue to benefit us year after year, not just in the things we grow, but in the things we get to enjoy, like tree treats, all the snacks and fun things that we get to eat. Think about this ice cream right here. We have a wood popsicle stick, we have ice cream that's got cellulose in it to give it its structure, and then chocolate on the outside. Those are all forest products, and it makes us appreciate our trees a little bit more. And the more we learn and the more time we spend outside, the more we understand that trees help our actual health. They're not just fun to look at, they improve how our bodies work. Our lungs and our heart health, our bodies can grow strong and get everything they need to feel how we want to feel. Taking care of our minds is important. Taking care of your brain means spending time outside. Everything will work better if your brain's on point. Keeping fresh air in your lungs is going to help your overall body and muscles and tissues get what they need as well. Everything will start to work together better. And you don't have to go far off to do this either. You can do this in your backyard, or take activities that you would be doing inside, outside. And if you really want, I like to, go for a hike. Come to a state forest or a national park or in your community and just spend time outdoors, because it helps us feel connected. And that's the other most important thing I like to remember on Arbor Day. Trees care for my mind. They help me feel how I want to feel. And by spending time outside and making sure that I have a relationship with my ecosystem, I can remember that I'm a part of it and that I'm responsible for it. So whether it's just soaking up some sunshine, breathing in fresh air, or reconnecting with my senses so I can remember what things feel like and look like and sound like, you start to notice more things about the forest than you noticed before. And as we get more connected and everything starts coming together and we realize how big an impact trees have in our lives, it all makes sense. Texas Arbor Day is not just about planting, it's about enjoying and celebrating, like a tree's birthday. You have a birthday and we celebrate you. Your friends and your family all get together to remind you you're special. Think of that tree for trees as well. Arbor Day is an opportunity for us to remember how special they are. And it doesn't matter how big the forest is, or how big the tree is, or how big you are. Children and adults, big communities, small communities, everybody, everywhere can benefit from spending time with our trees and treating them well, so they'll treat us well. And give us fun things to eat too. Now you know why it's so important to treat Texas well. Happy Texas Arbor Day.